Hello and welcome to the Uncultured Nerd Show. My name is Maeve and I'm an uncultured nerd who loves to rewind to her childhood, which also occasionally involves awakening certain repressed memories. Yes, like all well-adjusted adults, I have quite a few scarring memories of scenes in movies and TV shows which gave me nightmares for literally years. One in particular I will talk about caused a breakdown in high school over a decade after watching it. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I loved a series from a few years ago, YMS did, talking about movies and shows which scarred his childhood, so I decided to do my own. Buckle in, this is my top childhood scarring moments. Arthur Jekyll Hyde. This is my most vivid memory of being literally frozen in fear. It was a rare treat to watch TV during the day, but this afternoon me and my brothers somehow got permission, and of course PBS was what we turned on. That particular day we caught a few episodes of Arthur, which often had musical segments unrelated to the main plot. And the musical segment for this episode followed Brain as he read The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And the story seems to come to life. My memories of watching this are sitting on the futon couch wrapped in a blue unicorn blanket and being unable to avert my eyes or even blink. All I could do was sit in frozen terror and watch the quiet, calm character transform into a monster. This memory really sticks out because usually when a scary scene would happen, I would leave or close my eyes or hide under a blanket, but somehow I was just completely unable to do anything but stare. Watching it now, it's actually pretty cute, it's a catchy beat, and informative about literary elements. However, it does do something I've come to really hate, and completely spoils the book. Okay, quick tangent, I love the original book. It's an amazing story, but I am so bitter that I never was able to experience it without spoilers. And you may think, what could be spoiled about Jekyll and Hyde? The fact that Jekyll and Hyde are the same person, yeah, that's the twist. The whole book is from the perspective of Jekyll's neighbor, who becomes very concerned that Jekyll is letting this weirdo Mr. Hyde into his life, and it's not till the end that it's revealed they were the same guy. It's pretty much impossible to read that book without already knowing the ending going in, and I'm bitter. Okay, tangent over. Like I said, weird memory of being completely frozen in fear, but also not a fear I remember lasting for more than a few months, which, okay, felt long back then, but looking back, not too big a deal. Once Upon a Forest, Owl and Dragons. Once Upon a Forest is overall not very memorable, apart from two insanely intense scenes involving a killer owl and construction equipment. This owl, just look at those eyes. How could these eyes not haunt your nightmares? And it's always impressive to see normal everyday things turn into horrifying monsters, with a construction site becoming a pit of death. I think the big terrifying thing in these scenes is the feeling of helplessness. These animals being chased or accidentally almost crushed aren't just small, they're also kids who have never left their home valley before. All of this is completely new, and this asshole tide of life is just throwing every obstacle it can at them. All they want to do is save their dying friend, give him a break. This was not a film I watched a lot, despite owning it on VHS, and these scenes were why. Also, if I recall correctly, the rest of the story isn't amazing. Let's see those eyes one more time. The plants in Jumanji. This is one my mother continues to apologize to me for. So the setup is we were camper vanning around New Zealand after leaving Australia, and before coming back to the States, we met another American family at a camper park and we had dinner together. The parents were drinking, the kids were playing, and eventually a movie gets put on. Now, my mother was always very careful about what we watched, but well, she was a few glasses deep, so she didn't question much, and from the first board game scene, I was a little frozen with fear. These bats properly freaked me out, but it was the elongated sucking into the game effect that really froze me with fear. From that point on, I was slowly creeping towards that breaking point of running to my mommy screaming, which got closer and closer with every new creature and eventually arrived with the plants. Watching this scene today, yeah, still freaks me out a little bit, but I can plainly see the bad CGI and obvious puppet. Not 6-year-old me. 6-year-old me was fully convinced these were real and would come to eat me. I ran screaming out of the bunk to hug my mother, and we spent the rest of the night watching some Disney thing. The Iguana in FernGully. It wasn't often that I skipped a scene in one of my favorite movies, but this was one of them. As people who have seen my FernGully review know, I watched this film a lot as a child, but I always skipped this song because it just scared me. I guess I had a pretty big fear of being eaten alive, and this is one big song about getting ready to have someone eat you alive. It's also pretty obvious the whole time that the lizard is going to get him. Zach's got no chance in getting away, so death is inevitable. Of course, it's resolved almost immediately. I dare even say this whole song was a bit pointless and added nothing nothing but scarring memories. And it's not just the iguana. What in the world are these things? Is that mud coming to life? Is it a bug I'm unaware of? They're so creepy. So yeah, giant man-eating iguanas were a top fear for a big chunk of my childhood. The Island of Dreams, Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Now, this is a kind of different medium than discussed before, cause this child-scarring moment came from an audiobook. Specifically, the full cast audio recording of Voyage of the Dawn Treader, but I'll use footage from the movie to illustrate this section. So, for the last big obstacle of the book, the Dawn Treader comes across a giant black cloud which they enter and find a man stranded on an island. The man appears to have been there for years and begs them to rescue him because the island makes all your dreams come true. Or more accurately, your nightmares come true. Now in the recording I listened to, the following 5 minutes were filled with screaming, terrified whispering, and many horrifying background noises which weren't very placeable with any specific monster or thing, so of course my brain created the worst possible thing I could imagine for every individual sound that I heard.
Oh, Edmund, do you hear a noise like a huge pair of scissors opening and shutting? Somewhere over there.
Quiet, please. I can hear them crawling up the sides of the ship.
Oh, shh. It's going to settle on the mast.
Caspian, you're scaring me.
It also played off that fear I mentioned in the Wilbur section of a big empty space filled with stuff that wants to kill you and that you can never escape. While those trip-out scenes existed in Dreamland, this was a real place, or at least real in the book, that they couldn't just escape by waking up or coming down off of the drugs. I guess I got some solace that praying might help, but I'm pretty sure Aslan only came because Lucy's his favorite. I mean, he didn't help the guy who's been trapped there for hundreds of years, but 5 minutes of Lucy being in danger, he comes swooping in. So yeah, you don't always need a visual to scare the bejesus out of you. Audio can work just as well. Dinner scene in Charlotte's Web 2. Kind of in the same vein as FernGully with a big song number about being eaten, which I always had to skip. Charlotte's Web 2 was a favorite while living in Australia and probably was watched at least once a week minus this one scene. Wilbur confesses he's still scared of being turned into dinner and has a big trip-out dream sequence akin to pink elephants and heffalumps and woozles. There's dancing silverware chasing him down, endless mazes, ovens opening menacingly, and a lot more. It also doesn't help that the singing voice is constantly taunting Wilbur and telling him he's going to be dinner soon.
He likes those ham and eggs with bacon and pork fried legs. You better watch out now, Wilbur the pig.
Even the narrator is gunning for this pig to die. These weird trip-out scenes really freaked me out whenever they showed up because they existed in a non-world. A big open space of emptiness filled with things that are trying to scare or kill you. That's a huge nightmare for me still to this day. The earbugs in Wrath of Khan. Now this is not something I meant to watch. I just happened to be in the same room and unfortunately saw this scene. This was around Christmas in the late 2000s and my dad, the biggest Trekkie you'll ever meet, had been watching all the Star Trek movies with my older brother who had just finished the original series. This evening they were watching The Wrath of Khan and I happened to walk in and sit down just in time for this bug scene. I already got a little squeamish when the bug was taken off the bigger bug, but I was also at the age of wanting to like everything my brother liked, so I stayed, and then I bolted. I ran to the guest room where my aunt's dog was and hugged her for protection, and not joking, for over 5 years after I watched that scene, I refused to wear any hairstyle that didn't cover my ears. So pretty much I just wore my hair down. Even during gym class and those mile runs, I would not put my hair in a ponytail because then those bugs would crawl in. This was also the one I waited the longest to tell my parents about. They had no idea for years that I'd seen this scene, and when I finally did tell them, it was a big, oh, that's why moment. I do have yet to watch the whole movie again. I still have no clue what the point these bugs were in the grand scheme of the plot, but maybe someday I'll give in to my father and join him on a Star Trek movie marathon. And now the scar which ran so deep it resurfaced and caused a meltdown 10 years later in the middle of high school. Little Shop of Horrors. Not the film, the stage play. But I'll use clips from the film to illustrate it because it's pretty much the same thing. So the school we lived at was putting on a black box production of the show and my parents were friends with the director and had a few students in the cast. When I heard the plot, I immediately refused to go. Memories of Jumanji were creeping up at the mention of man-eating plants and I knew I wouldn't be able to handle it. But the director assured my parents it was a complete completely kid-friendly show, and many other kids had already gone and loved it. So for some reason, I was convinced to go. Now, for the first few numbers, I was fine. Even the plant wasn't bothering me since it was still very small. Then the dentist showed up and got a whole song about loving to hurt people. I didn't get the joke, I was just scared. And then the gas mask appeared, and I got really scared. Then body parts get fed to the plant, and I got really, really scared. And the fear kept mounting and mounting until the end where every main character is eaten and the plant takes over the world. And then on the way out, my dad pulls me into the green room and introduces me to his students, the guy who played the dentist and the guy who voiced the plant. Yeah, I cried the whole way home. And continued to cry until bedtime, and couldn't sleep. And spent many, many years terrified of that show. Eventually, of course, the fear subsided, but one day in high school, I opened the email announcing this year's spring musical and burst into tears. This was going to be my very first production as lead stage manager, and I knew there was no chance in hell I could do it. But the director also knew there was no way in hell he was going to lose his stage manager, so after a full hour of convincing, I agreed to come back and spent the next several weeks acclimating myself to the show. I listened to the soundtrack over the course of several days, and eventually got up the courage to watch the movie. Looking back, I think the main thing that scared me about this show was that the plant wins. He eats all the characters, then takes over the world, and that's the end. No weakness, no death, just inevitable vanquishing of the human race. As a kid, I definitely didn't get the overall metaphor and societal messaging going on. I just saw big scary thing takes over the world and we can't do anything to stop it. But fortunately, that choice for the spring musical did a lot to heal this scar because I grew to love the show. It's actually become one of my favorites. Although there was a pretty funny in retrospective but terrifying in the moment thing that happened when I was backstage and had to go into the side room to turn on the lights. In the complete darkness, I reached for the light and bumped into a giant foam thing. I pushed it aside, flipped the switch, and was staring right into the mouth of the final puppet. No one heard the scream because I was alone in the theater, but it was still very, very real. And those were my top childhood scarring scenes from movies, TV shows, plays, and one audiobook. While it was a little scary rewatching all this, it was also fun to realize I tend to catastrophize things in my head, and it was never as bad as I remember. Now, do you have any childhood scarring moments from TV and movies, or perhaps the stage or books? Are any of yours the same as mine? Leave them in the comments below, and I look forward to reading them. Thank you as always to all my fellow freaks for watching, and I'll see you next time with something else. See y'all later!